Previously on my channel. List the books or authors you will never read. James Patterson. I don't like James Patterson. I would kind of like to say why, but I'm not sure if I could be liable or get sued or whatever. So I'll just say I do not like James Patterson. I'm not really interested in reading him at all. I'm ashamed about this. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I just did one of these last week, I think, but it's time for another. Here's another book haul. So the other day I had a craving to go to the bookstores in the other town, not the bookstore I usually frequent, just because I haven't been there in like a year or so. Thank you, baby. They are, I don't know, about 25 minutes away from where I live. Maybe half an hour, maybe 35 minutes or so. The first bookstore is one that like really smells a lot of like coffee and stuff because they have one or two places in there where they brew coffee. The first time I was in there, my first time visiting, I really liked it. But this time I didn't really like it so much. I don't know if it was just the coffee they were brewing that day or what. But the first time it was just like, coffee, it smells so good. This time it was just kind of like, And the scent of coffee is like one of my favorite smells. I do not drink coffee though. To me it is just like heated up mud puddle water. Not interested. But anyway, so this time I just didn't really like that bookstore as much. And I don't really like that bookstore too much compared to the one I usually go to. Because one big reason is they do not like have signed stickers on the spine of books. I'm not sure like if they mark signed books at all. So like you have to actually take the book off the shelf and like open it up maybe to see if it's signed. And I just don't like that. I like just looking at a shelf and seeing signed sticker. That is like a magnet for my eyes, and I'm gonna immediately see who that book is because I just love signed books. But they don't have that, and I don't know why. But anyway, so I had to buy books just because I like supporting bookstores. So the first book I got off the top 1000 list, I know I could probably find it from the library, but I just kind of wanted to buy some things. And this is a book that I kind of have low expectations for. I don't really think I'll like it. So I don't want to like keep checking it out from the library because that's probably what would happen is I'll probably just read like 10 pages and then put it down for a few weeks, read 20 pages or whatever, put it down for 3 months, read 10 pages. That's kind of what I think I'll probably do with this book. But it's Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. I do not know anything about this book whatsoever. I think at one point I may have tried reading the first few pages, but I think I wasn't getting into it. But it wasn't like a serious read through. I think I just picked it up from the library and like sat down and tried reading a couple pages, and I was like, nah, I don't think I want to check this book out. But anyway, Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. Do not know anything about it. The cover kind of looks almost like it's going to be like a comedy book or a humorous book. So that does make me more intrigued to read it. But I don't know, just like the title and the author, I'm just like, Kingsley Amis, I don't know anything about him. Doesn't really interest me. But we'll see. Books like that where I went in with like real low expectations, some of those books have really surprised me. So we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of eager to try it though. Next, also off the top 1000 list, 1000 Books to Read Before You Die by James Mustich, is the Chaney'sville Incident. I don't even really want to read that because I like to go into books without knowing anything about it. But obviously like African-American figure, oh darn it, and there's a KKK figure. So something to do with slavery. In fact, I kind of vaguely recall that title now, the Chaney'sville Incident. But I don't know offhand what it was. By David Bradley, top 1000 book. Kind of curious to give it a read. I don't know if it's nonfiction or fiction. It's, judging by the title, it's probably nonfiction. We will see though. Next off the top 1000 list is John, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Le Carre. I'm guessing Le Carre. I don't know. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. I know like several of his books were made into movies, like spy films. I know he's like a writer of spy thrillers. That's not really a genre that interests me. I do like action adventure genre, but not really like the spy genre so much, especially like Soviet versus like American and British spies. because it's always like trying to make it out like the Russians are the bad guys and the British and the Americans are the good guys. And I don't know, I just don't really like that too much. I think it's just so tiresome always having the Russians be the bad guys. But we'll see. Last from that bookstore is H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. This is off the top 1000 list. I have another book by H.G. Wells, The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I'm a little bit more interested in reading since there was a movie based on it, which I have not seen. But I just don't really know much about The Invisible Man. I don't know, I've never read H.G. Wells before, so we'll see. And I do like that it is a short book, so that should probably make it pretty easy to read and get through. The other bookstore I went into, I'm kind of liking this one a little bit more now, even though it is definitely a smaller bookstore. They have a lot fewer books, and a lot of the books they do have are like more newer releases and more popular books. But I just like it because like in the bookstore, a lot of like the books have like tags that says like, you know, so-and-so recommends this book, you know, so it may be like, you know, Casey recommends this book, Sarah recommends this book, and it has a little like note card saying like about the book or why they recommend it. Or there's note cards saying like, you know, ask Teresa to tell you about this book or whatever. And I just really like that. It just adds so much personalization to it. So I'm kind of a little bit fonder of that bookstore now, and it's only like, I don't know, 4 businesses over from the other bookstore. But the book I got is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I have a signed book by her. This is the book that's off the top 1000 list, and it's the first book of a series. I've actually checked this book out from the library. I checked it out not quite a year ago, and I only read like 20 pages of it and then returned it and haven't checked it out since then. I went to the library again about 2 months ago and checked it out again, but I didn't even get to reading it just because I'm not too much in a reading mood. So I kind of just figure I don't want to keep checking the book out from the library. I'd rather just have a copy and read it at my own pace whenever I can get around to it. But at least I have a copy now. Since I wanted to get more than one book from the other bookstore, I asked the girl at the checkout stand what she would recommend. So she said she was currently reading this book and she liked it pretty well. She liked how it was going. And she asked like what kind of books I liked. She saw that I had the Ursula Le Guin book, but I told her, you know, I'm not too much into fantasy. I read a lot of like classical literature or whatever. So she said she was reading this book currently, and it kind of read like that, kind of read like literary fiction. And so I went ahead and got it, and because I've also seen this writer's books around, but it's Amor Towles, The Lincoln Highway, from the best-selling author of A Gentleman in Moscow. So I guess that's his real popular book. I have not read it. I've not read anything by him, but I've seen his books around. So I just really wanted to buy at least 2 books from the bookstore. So why not? The author is not on the top 1000 list, but anyway, I usually don't read a lot of current fiction, so giving it a try, we'll see how it goes. So, from my local bookstore, the first book off the top 1000 list is Their Finest Hour by Winston Churchill. Don't really know what to say about it. I do like history. I'm not too much into the Second World War, even though I know quite a lot about it. It's just not really too much a subject I'm into. And I don't like autobiographies or memoirs really, but since it's a book by a prime minister about the war, it's kind of interesting from that perspective just to see what he has to say. So I am intrigued about it for that reason. And I got it free and it's on the top 1000 list, so I needed to read it anyway, so why not? Next, I saw this book a few weeks ago, but I thought I may have already had it, but I got home and I checked and I definitely did not, I think. And I kind of want to get every book by this writer, and this is a book on the top 1000 list, but it's Graham Greene, The Third Man. I am kind of concerned because it is such a short book, so I'm just kind of thinking like, is this the real The Third Man, or is this like an abridged version or something? Is this like a screenplay of it or something? But I think it's the actual book, The Third Man. I guess it's just a novella or a novelette. Maybe it's pretty short. I do kind of like Graham Greene though. This is a book on the top 1000 list, and I know it's a pretty popular one of his books, so we'll see how it goes. I have several other Graham Greene books on my to-read list before I get to this one, so I kind of want to read every Graham Greene book, and so I'm trying to read them in the order he published them. So I don't know where this falls in his chronology of his bibliography. Gosh. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see when I get to it, but I'm glad I have it. Next, another top 1000 book. I do not know anything about it or the author, but it's The Book of Laughter and Forgetting by Milan Kundera. Do not know anything about it. I don't really even want to look at the book to see anything about anything because I just like to go into books blind. So that way, it's solely based on the writer to pull me in and their writing. Basically, I don't really have any high expectations or anything. It's just the author can either pull me in with their writing or not. That's how I like to go into books. Okay, and let's get into this next part. So, gosh, I don't know where to begin. I was in the back room of the bookstore working on something, and I heard the owner saying how this guy brought in a library of like 20 Clive Cussler books signed. And I was kind of like, my ears picked up. First because it was Clive Cussler, and then he said signed. And so right away I'm just like, huh? Clive Cussler was a major influence for me. I have one of his books right there, The Emperor's Revenge signed. I have 3 signed things by Cussler. I have that book. I also have a poster my ex-girlfriend got me of just like the Cussler signed, like showing several of his book covers and stuff, so that's real cool too. And then I also wrote Cussler a letter many years ago telling him about how he inspired my books, especially my Trevor Knight series, and how I based my Trevor Knight series off of him. And Clive Cussler hand wrote me back a letter, and he was really encouraging in his letter, and it's just one of my most treasured possessions ever. And when I sent him that, I did not like send him a book to sign at all, which was just real crazy. I mean, you could imagine, how much I love signed books. I didn't even try to like ask him to sign a book for me because I just hoped to like talk to him, basically to give him a letter and let him know what a big influence he was for me in my writing. And he wrote me back a letter, and so I got a signature from him anyway, but in a personal letter to me, a handwritten letter. And that is just so cool. I think it's so special to me that the author would take their time to like hand write a letter for a fan. And Cussler, he's a multi-millionaire with all these like classical cars, each worth like $500,000 a piece or more. And to take the time to write a letter to a fan, and he was really encouraging and real gracious. And so that just shows me you are really never too big for people. No matter how much fame or money you get, you can still have time for people and still be a good person. I think that is real cool and gave me a real good impression of Cussler. So again, he is a major influence for me. So when I was at the bookstore and I heard the bookstore owner say, oh, I just got like 20 or 25 signed books by Cussler, I was, whoop, I'm interested. But at the time I did not get the books. I don't know why. Maybe he was like just in the process of getting them. But a couple days later, I went into the bookstore and I saw these stacks of Clive Cussler books and signed. So I was going through them and I was kind of thinking, well, I already have 3 things signed by Cussler, a book, a poster, and a handwritten letter. So I'm kind of like, well, I don't really need any of these books. But then I saw one of his Dirk Pitt books and I was like, ooh, the book I have by him is not a Dirk Pitt book. So maybe I should get a Dirk Pitt book. And the only Dirk Pitt book I could think of that I would really want would be the first Clive Cussler book I ever read, which was Atlantis Found. Atlantis Found was a major influence for me. Basically, I think Atlantis Found was probably the first book I ever really legit read all the way through, and I read it in high school. And the reason was because I had to do like book reports, and I kind of figured out by then that I could not fake it anymore because I tried doing that in middle school, like just not even read the book. I would just make up my own plot for the books just based on the title. But when I got to high school, I was probably like, well, I probably can't outsmart the teachers anymore, so I probably need to actually read a book. So I saw this book, Atlantis Found, at the library, and I picked it up and I read it. And from then on, after like 2 years, I read like all 14, I think, of Clive Cussler's books. I think Atlantis Found may have been the 14th book in the series, and I read all of them within a year or two. And I kind of remember there was a point where my English teacher was like, thank you, baby. My English teacher was like, this is it, Sean. This is the last Clive Cussler book I'm going to give you credit for. So it's just kind of funny to me. I went from never reading a book to the English teacher having to say, Sean, I'm not going to count any more of these authors. You need to read something else. And that is what provoked me to read like Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck and The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, which I have a signed copy of somewhere here, which I also think is cool, a signed copy of The Good Earth. But anyway, so that is also what really inspired me to become a writer. I was always kind of interested in writing at that point, and I think I may have like had like little short stories I would write, maybe just like a page of something I would write, and that would really be it. But once I began reading Cussler, I really began to think I would like to become a writer someday. I'd like to become an author someday. I'd like to have my own books. And so that is what really got me started on writing as well, thinking I want to be an actual writer. So Clive Cussler was the most influential writer for me, both from a reading perspective. He got me into reading, and he really inspired my writing, especially the Dirk Pitt books, because the Dirk Pitt books were like it for me. And I really based my Trevor Knight series off of Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt books. For instance, one of the characters in my books, the main character's boss, is named Samuel Decker, and his middle initial is N. And something I kind of do in each book is I actually give him a different middle name in each book, which is just kind of a little fun thing I do, like, you know, Samuel Noah Decker, Samuel Nerlens Decker, whatever, Samuel Nehemiah Decker. Every book he has a different middle name. That's just kind of a fun little thing I do just for myself. But if you'll break it down, you'll notice, if you look at his name, Samuel, S-A-N, the initial N, and Decker. That spells out Sandecker. In the Dirk Pitt series, Dirk Pitt's boss is James Sandecker. And Sandecker is a retired admiral. In my books, Trevor Knight's boss, Samuel Decker, is a retired admiral. So it's just Sandecker. I also have a character in an upcoming book. This is a character I actually created long ago, but it's actually finally being introduced now in book 4, I think. Bird. There's a character in the book who is named Cliff Cussler. So Cliff Cussler, Clive Cussler, and in the book, Cliff Cussler is like a billionaire philanthropist who has a collection of classic cars. So it's Clive Cussler. So I just have a lot of Clive Cussler references throughout my Trevor Knight books, especially major influence for them. So anyway, I really thought, well, I do not have any signed books by Cussler for Dirk Pitt books. Bird. So it'd be cool to have a signed Dirk Pitt book. So I really wanted a signed copy of Atlantis Found. So I looked through the stack of like 20 books, and Cussler has like 65 books or something like that, 70, maybe 80 books he's published. So out of like 20 of them or 25 of them, something like that, I looked and there was a signed copy of Atlantis Found. And I got it from the bookstore owner for $15. So I was like, $15 for a signed copy of Atlantis Found? I'll take it. So I was real super excited about that. Thank you, baby. I was that bird. So I got the book home. I was so excited. Then, I don't know, the next time I went into work, the bookstore owner was like, hey, Sean, I need you to bring that book back. I don't think the guy who has a Cussler library is going to sell me those books after all. So I need that book back. You need to bring it back. And so I was just like, oh, my spirits are crushed. I was so excited to have a signed copy of Atlantis Found, the first book really I ever read. But I brought it back and it was just kind of so painful. Like, here you go. Thank you, baby. So I brought it back, and then I think maybe the next day or maybe the next week, the bookstore owner calls me and says, "Hey, Sean, so I did buy that collection from the guy, so you can get that book back. Which book was it? Oh, Atlantis Found. Okay, I'll pull that for you and make sure I don't sell it." So I got it. Atlantis Found, signed by Clive Cussler. And this is a first edition, of course, which is just real cool. So this is my fourth Clive Cussler autograph. It's my first book by him that's a Dirk Pitt book, and it's the first book I legit like ever read, so major influence for me. This is like the book that got me into reading and writing. It all began here with Atlantis Found, and I have a signed copy of it, so that is just so special for me. I'm so excited about that. I'm so glad I have it, and yeah, real glad about that. So the next time I went into the bookstore to pick that up, I actually began walking along the row of Cussler books, just like 20 or 25 books. You can probably guess where this is heading, knowing my affinity for signed books. I'm just walking along looking at all these different Clive Cussler books and all these co-authored books, and I'd open them up and I'd see a lot of the books are signed also by the co-author. So I'm looking at the books and I'm just thinking, I'd kind of like to get one of these. And one of the books I was looking for was a book co-authored by Jack DeBruhl, because Cussler has a lot of co-authored books, and I think DeBruhl is the only author he co-authors books with that I have actually seen his books in the wild, just standalone Jack DeBruhl books. So there were two there, but I checked and neither was signed by Jack DeBruhl. They were just signed by Cussler. I figure I could get the signed book by Cussler, and then maybe I could send it to Jack DeBruhl to try to get him to sign it as well. I haven't considered that. Is Jack DeBruhl still alive? I may actually consider doing that, because I'd kind of like to get one signed by him as well. But I decided that, I don't want to just have a signed book by Cussler. I think it would also be cool to have one signed by Clive Cussler's son, Dirk, because they also have co-authored several of the Dirk Pitt books. The Dirk Pitt books is the main series for me. That's the main one I really only care about. So I got one that is signed by both Cussler and his son, Dirk Cussler. So this is Celtic Empire, and it's signed by both. So that's just real cool. So that way, Dirk Cussler is continuing the Dirk Pitt books. So I just kind of like it. It's another Cussler signature and it's Dirk Cussler, so his son. So I have both the father and the son, and it's a Dirk Pitt book, so that's cool. So I'm glad I got that. There were also some just standalone, the most recent book by just Dirk Cussler. That was signed as well. But since this is signed by both, I wanted it. And there were actually several signed books by both of them at the bookstore. But this is the one I got. I'm not quite sure why I got this one specifically, but I did. I think I may have gotten this book, Celtic Empire, because I think it could have been the last Dirk Pitt book that Clive Cussler and Dirk Cussler did. So I think I just kind of preferred that one over their first book together. Just, it's their last one. But this also got me curious, what was actually Cussler's last book published in his lifetime? And I saw several books were actually published in 2020, the year he died. So I was I don't know about which book was the last one he published, which book was the last book he signed. But I saw that one of the books was published a month after his death, and I saw there was a copy of it at the bookstore. So I got it. So it's Clive Cussler and Graham Brown, Journey of the Pharaohs, a novel from the Numa Files. So this book was, I think, published the month after his death, which is real weird to have a signed book by him after he died. But that just shows you, he must have had a copy of this and signed it, before it was published, before it came out on sale. He probably signed a bunch of copies and died before it was published. So that's kind of a somber thing to probably have one of the last books he signed. But anyway, I'm glad I have it. But of them, I'm definitely most excited about having the signed book Atlantis Found, a Dirt Pit book, and the first book that I ever really read, the book that got me into reading. Last of all, the guy who brought in all the Cussler books, he also had like several signed books by James Patterson. I think he had like 3 or 4 of them. James Patterson is an author. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. But I've kind of wanted a signed book by him for a while just because it is James Patterson. He's probably one of the most famous or popular authors around after Stephen King. I mean, whatever bookstore you go into, you'll see like 20 books by James Patterson. So there were like 4 or 5 different books by him. So I decided to get this one, Judge and Jury, signed by, I think it's just signed by James. Yeah, it's just signed by James Patterson. I was looking for like the Alex Cross series. Alex Cross is like the protagonist. I think that's his name from like Kiss the Girls. It's kind of like James Patterson's main series kind of, but I didn't see any books from that series. So I don't know much about James Patterson at all. So I was like looking at all the different books. Some of them were parts of series, but I think this is a standalone book, so I just kind of preferred a standalone book rather than a book that is like book 3 in a series. And it was only $9, and I think I probably got it for like half off, so I probably just paid $5 for this. So $5 for a James Patterson signed book. Why not? I'm really not going to treasure it, so I'm going to try to find some place in my bookshelf where I could hide this book away from sight, out of mind, because I don't want to like display this. It's like that would be such a stain on my shelf, like just James Patterson. Hell no, I do not want anyone to see I have a James Patterson. I should actually do a video like my 10 least favorite signed books. You know, I'm always talking about my signed books. I should do like the 10 signed books I have that I just do not like at all. I could probably come up with 10. And this book would definitely be on it. I don't like James Patterson. I'm not interested in him. I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to read anything else by him. But it's James Patterson. And I like signed books. So I'm glad I have a signed book by James Patterson. But I'm not excited about it. As far as I'm concerned, this is going into hiding and I'm not looking at this anymore. But anyway, that is it for my book haul. Now, I think I need to go on a book buying ban because I've just been getting a lot of books. The only books I think I will be willing to get is if they are free, if they are donation copies where I could just get a free copy. If I have the opportunity to do that, I think I will. So those will not count here in my book buying ban. Donation books, books I can get for free. But otherwise, I do not want to buy any new books unless I correspondingly get rid of one of the books that is on my shelf. So that is my new little rule I'm doing, and I'm going to try to do it for the rest of the year. So if I get any new books, I have to get rid of a book as well, because I am running out of space. And even like the space here, when the camera is not rolling, I have this shelf filled with books, and I have this part filled with books as well. I am running out of space. I need to get rid of some of these books. I need to read some of these books. So for the rest of the year, I'm going to try to go on a book buying ban. No new books unless I get rid of a book. So we'll see if I can do that, or if we'll see just quickly break down with that. What I'll probably be doing is in about 2 weeks, I'll post a video of like 12 more books I just got. But anyway, that is it. So thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Bye.
2, 3, 4.